Hi, welcome to the channel. Today I'm reacting to Mitsi Studios' Blitzkrieg. Before we get started, I want you to comment down below. Do you think that Mitsi Studio is going to give any credit to Sir John Monash, an Australian general who actually pioneered the combined arm tactics of the Blitzkrieg? Or is this video going to give all the credit to the German general, General Heinz Guderian? I personally think that they're not going to mention Sir John at all. Let's get to it.
Blitzkrieg, the tactical dream scenario of Germany's favorite villainous mustache enthusiast Adolf Hitler. You know, the guy who looked at World War I trench warfare and thought, how can we make the new war go faster and even more terrifying? Apparently, a guy called Heinz Guderian claimed to have the answer. Storm in like a boss with fast-moving tanks, screaming Stuka dive bombers and artillery while everybody chats over the radio. And just like that, Blitzkrieg was born. Combining speed, firepower and the audacity of a drunken dare, or a meth head. But we will come to that later.
So just as I thought, they did not mention General Monash, who actually pioneered the idea of combined arms in the Battle of Hamel in July of 1918 and the Battle of Amiens in August of 1918 in World War I. German General Heinz Guderian was so impressed by these tactics that he then developed what we call Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Giving full credit for the Blitzkrieg to General Heinz would be like giving full credit to Apple for the smartphone. Yes, Apple was responsible for the smartphone boom. Their first smartphone actually was released in 2007. However, Apple was not the first company to come up with the idea of the smartphone. That was IBM, who released the first smartphone in 1994 called the IBM Simon Personal Communicator.
Let's set the scene. It's 1939, and one of the countries in Europe that was just minding its own business was Poland. A place that had mostly psycho-wacko dictators as neighbors.
True.
Speaking of red flags, I'm sure the swastika and Soviet banner were among them. Suddenly, Poland found itself hosting a Blitzkrieg beta test, and right from the start, things turned into chaos for the Polish army. The Luftwaffe was bombing cities and railways, cutting off Polish frontline forces and generally making things very uncomfortable for everyone below. Meanwhile, panzer divisions rolled through the countryside, bypassing strongholds with high speed like it was all a scene from The Fast and the Furious. Get it? Okay. Then on September the 17th, the Soviet Union crashed the party from the east, because why let Hitler have all the fun? After the swift conquest of Poland, the war shifted gears into what's known as the Blitzkrieg, or as it's cheekily translated, the sitting on your butt war. While the French fortified their borders and waited for something to happen, the Germans were anything but idle. They used this lull to finalize invasion plans for Denmark and Norway. The butt-sitting phase officially ended when Germany steamrolled Denmark in just a few hours. Clearly, those Panzer boys were on a tight schedule. Norway, however, proved to be a trickier nut to crack, thanks to a pesky little thing called the Royal Navy, and the fact that Norway is, well, kind of massive and covered in snow. Perhaps a bad omen for what lay ahead. By now, the German armoured convoy had reached its next destination, France and the Low Countries. The French, feeling pretty confident, had constructed a supposedly impenetrable defensive marvel known as the Maginot Line. It was like building a massive wall to keep out burglars, but forgetting to lock the back door.
In the 1930s, the French actually spent about $4 billion in today's money to build this 300-mile-long defensive line full of fortifications, but it turned out to be a massive failure.
Predictably, the Germans didn't bother with the front. Instead, they strolled right through the Ardennes forest, a region the French assumed was too dense for tanks. Turns out the Germans were basically saying, "Hold my schnitzel." In addition to schnitzels, German soldiers were also supplied with pervitin. As it turns out, Blitzkrieg wasn't just about tanks and tactics. It was about troops blitzed out of their minds on methamphetamine. Now, if you're struggling to imagine what an invasion led by a meth-fueled Nazi horde in armored vehicles looks like, well, let me paint that picture for you.
So Germany was not the only ones to give meth or some sort of amphetamine to their troops. The United States, Great Britain, Finland, and many other countries. The United States version was called Benzedrine, and I think by the time the war ended, they had actually given out over 500 million tablets.
Auf der Heide.
Auf der Heide blüht ein kleines Blümelein und das heißt Erika. Heiß von 100.000 kleinen Bienelein wird umschwärmt Erika. Denn ihr Herz ist voller Süßigkeit. Zarter Duft entströmt im Blütenkleid. Auf der Heide blüht ein kleines Blümelein und das heißt Erika.
Oh, this animation is amazing. Is this a remix of something? Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that happened. This was apparently the German interpretation of a Tour de France, with the panzer divisions reaching the outskirts of Dunkirk in just 2 weeks.
I think they actually stopped about 15 miles outside of Dunkirk, actually.
For reasons still debated, Hitler then decided to call a halt to his tanks and let the Luftwaffe finish the job. Part of the delay was likely because Hermann Göring, eager to prove his worth, wanted to claim some glory.
Can somebody remind me who Hermann Göring is? I'm assuming he was the commander of the German Air Force, maybe? Not sure.
Sadly, he proved to be far better at clearing out buffets than winning battles. Anyway, the Luftwaffe failed to wipe out around 400,000 British and French troops on the beaches, and most of them managed to hop on boats and float off to England.
About 70% of the boats that evacuated the troops were civilian. They were actually called the Little Ships of Dunkirk. And about 200 of those civilians were actually injured and killed, while about 5,000 of the evacuating soldiers were actually killed. About 90,000 were left on the beach to become POWs, where about 340,000 were actually successfully evacuated. So you could call Dunkirk a successful failure, kind of like Apollo 13.
Despite the Luftwaffe's fuck-up at Dunkirk, the Germans still demonstrated the overwhelming power of their Blitzkrieg doctrine. In less than a week, they had occupied the Netherlands, bombed the Dutch city of Rotterdam to rubble, and forced Luxembourg to surrender in just 12 hours. Ouch.
No surprise, very small country.
What followed was the Battle of Britain, where Göring yet again showed the world he was more obese than capable. His Stuka dive bombers performed great during the invasion of France, but high in the skies above Britain, surrounded by Spitfires and Hurricanes, yeah, not so much. At this point, Hitler focused his attention on the east. In June 1941, Germany decided to take its lightning war to a whole new level with Operation Barbarossa, the biggest road trip in history. This was a Blitzkrieg campaign on steroids, or methamphetamine, you pick. Tanks were rolling through the Soviet defenses and planes were bombing Soviet positions into oblivion. By the end of summer 1941, the Germans were moving fast and the Red Army was scrambling to keep up. But then the Germans got introduced to Rasputitsa, aka the mud season. This quagmire was a far cry from rally racing through the green fields of northern France. By November, the Russian winter set in and pretty much screwed up the entire plan of the Wehrmacht to capture Moscow. When spring arrived and most German soldiers finished defrosting their testicles, the army once again blitzed their way through Soviet defense lines toward the Caucasus and the city of Stalingrad. After months of maintaining the initiative, Hitler thought it would be cool to capture the city of Stalingrad because it bore Stalin's name. Well, certainly it would end up being a lot cooler than anticipated.
I believe the Battle of Stalingrad may be the bloodiest battle in history in terms of how many people were actually killed. If not, I think it's probably top 3. If you know for sure, please drop it in the comments.
The Battle of Stalingrad quickly stripped the Germans of every tactical advantage they had. No more fast tank maneuvers and no more close air support.
Why no more close air support? Was it because they were so far into the USSR, or I don't know.
Just an endless maze of destroyed buildings packed with Russian snipers. Luckily for the Germans, there was no Russian winter to... sorry about that. Another Russian winter set in and turned many Nazi soldiers into ice sculptures. A setback. To make matters worse, the Soviet army was about to show the world they would be the ultimate Blitzkrieg bastards. 2 giant armies pierced through the German flanks and encircled Germany's 6th Army, still holding out in the city. With no fuel for their tanks, no food for their soldiers, and zero protection against the cold, the 6th Army was doomed and ultimately surrendered to the Russians. Despite all that, the days of Blitzkrieg were not over for the Germans. They would still carry out fast-moving tank maneuvers, just more in the direction of Berlin.
Let's not forget that General Rommel also used the Blitzkrieg in North Africa in the Battle of Tobruk, and was unsuccessful. Thank you guys so much for watching, and a little bit of trivia. But that structure that we saw in Berlin, that is called Brandenburg Gate. And if you walk a few kilometers down the road, you'll come to an apartment complex with a parking lot. And you'll see a sign that says that this was the location of Hitler's bunker, the one where he actually ended himself. After the war ended, Germany went to great lengths to make sure that that location would not become a shrine or a holy place for Nazis and other groups. If you want to watch another video from Mitsi Studios, here you go. And once I react to the Battle of Hamel, I'll put it right here.